You're listening to Innovation for Alpha, where we explore everything at the intersection of healthcare innovation and finance. Through our discussions and interviews, we keep you informed and educated about healthcare innovations, next-level venture investing, and everything involving the combination of the two.
Welcome, everybody. This is Tobin Arthur with Innovation for Alpha. I'm joined by Mike Donahue today with ConveyMed. Very anxious to get to know you, Mike, a little bit more and learn about the company. And why don't we start just with your background, share with everybody how you came about to start this company.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So we started ConveyMed, and our mission really is to elevate podcasting as a form for medical education. And we'll go into our thesis and the problem that we're trying to solve in a moment. But sort of how I came to this is I've had 3 careers. My first career was as a physical therapist. I worked for a pretty prominent orthopedic clinic here in Memphis, which is my hometown. And then I did some home health, which was very interesting. See some opportunity of looking after patients in all kinds of settings. And then it was time to try something different. I went and got an MBA and joined Smith & Nephew, which is a large medical device company. My hometown, Memphis, as I mentioned, has a large network of orthopedic companies. A lot of the Smith & Nephew has a presence here. Medtronic, their spine division is in Memphis. Stryker's foot and ankle division is in Memphis. There are a number of startups. So there's a big startup community, particularly in musculoskeletal device. In fact, our lead investor is MB Venture Partners. He primarily invests in musculoskeletal startups. So there's a big ecosystem here for orthopedics. And so I was at Smith & Nephew for 19 years. I had a great run there. It was a great company. I started off in marketing on the joint reconstruction side and worked on some different product lines. Was fortunate enough to work with some brilliant physicians and learn a lot about the developing product and bringing it to life or bringing it to market, launching it into the marketplace, doing education of both of our sales reps and physicians, all the way through phasing something out and starting over, rinse and repeat. Yep. So it was a great opportunity to kind of see how the life cycle of bringing a product to life really works in an environment that was, just a lot of fun. I spent time on the joint reconstruction side, then I moved over to do trauma and extremities, try something completely different. Was a GM of the trauma division for a while, and that was a lot of fun. Trauma surgeons are crazy, but they're fun to work with. They really are. And then the last 4 years of my career there, I was the SVP of global marketing for Smith & Nephew's orthopedic division. So, it was a great experience there. I left in 2019 and I joined who, as I mentioned earlier, became our lead investor, Gary Stevenson with MB Venture Partners, as kind of an executive or an entrepreneur in residence. And we were working on a few projects together. We were looking at some different things, probably more in my sweet spot, but I still had this idea to create my own company around the podcast space, because as a big podcast consumer myself, it really had replaced, I wouldn't say fully replaced, but partially replaced reading as a means by which to consume content, because I could just throw my headphones on, pick out a podcast and go for a run or ride my bike. Maybe that's not a safe thing to do while you're riding a bike, but so far so good. Driving my car, or if I'm doing chores, my wife tells me to vacuum, the house, I'll put on a podcast and vacuum. So the great thing about podcasting is you can do it anywhere and wherever you want. And so I was like, there's really a business opportunity here that we really haven't exploited yet. So that was sort of the background behind ConveyMed.
I love it. And you picked a good time too. Right before COVID, that whole world of orthopedics probably was at a standstill in some ways. I know a lot of the members of our network were shut down and different time, different era. By the way, when you were with Smith & Nephew, so where was the headquarters that you were typically reporting into? I mean, were you generally virtual as a result of your role, or was it based there in Memphis a lot of the time?
Oh, no, the largest segment of Smith & Nephew's employee base is in Memphis. The orthopedic division is in Memphis. There are about 2,500 employees here.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. It's a UK based company. So I reported up, to, and then there's, there are offices in Boston, and of course it's a London company. And of course we have offices over the world, but the biggest footprint was Memphis. Started off as Richards Medical, which was a longtime Memphis company, and Smith and Nephew acquired them. I don't exactly remember when, maybe in the, I want to say late 80s or early 90s.
Okay. That's good.
Yeah.
Didn't know that. So talk about ConveyMed. What's the, what was it that, you had a personal interest in podcasts? What was the idea around the business, and kind of where are you now with it?
Yeah. So, our thesis is that podcasting, although it's very, very popular, is underutilized as a medium for medical education. So our mission really is to elevate podcasting, or really mobile audio education, as a medium. If you look at the data, for example, of podcast consumption, there are 162 million Americans listen to podcasts, and 80 million every single week. And if you dig a little deeper, you see that there are some podcasts out there that are pretty popular amongst, physicians and other healthcare professionals. For example, the Curbsiders Internal Medicine podcast, which was founded by some internal medicine residents a few years back, boasts over 40,000 downloads per episode, and they do an episode every single week.
Wow.
Which tells you that there is demand for this type of content. And then if you dig a little deeper into some of the academic literature over the last couple of years, some papers have come out to show that residents actually prefer podcasts over other forms of content like journal publications or even Google. They like the give and take, that kind of like what we're having here of a podcast, right? They like the informal sort of vibe that you create with a conversation. Tends to be more of a narrative, and our brains are wired up to learn and consume stories in a much more impactful way than, a boring lecture. Mm-hmm. And our insight is that particularly the mobile generation, digital natives, prefer all their content on a mobile device. The last thing they want to do is go to a website and watch a webinar at 8 o'clock in the evening after they've had a long day in clinic or a long day in the hospital, right? What they want to do is put on their headphones, go out for a run, listen to a 15-minute podcast from a set of experts, and earn their continuing education credits that way. Mm-hmm. So the problem is the big podcast platforms like Apple and Spotify, they're not really designed for that. So if you want to deliver accredited CME content, very difficult to do on Apple and Spotify. If you want to include images so that you can do case presentations and add other types of learning, very difficult to do on the open platforms. If you're a creator and you want to monetize your content, very difficult to do on open platforms. So we built our own. So ConveyMed is a podcast app designed specifically for medical education to kind of solve the gaps that we saw in open platforms. All we have are medical podcasts. So we serve as a podcast directory, much like Apple and Spotify do. They pull the RSS feeds of different podcasts in. We do the same thing, but we only curate medical podcasts. So we have about 160 podcasts on our platform.
Okay.
Alongside that, and really more importantly, is we are seeking exclusive relationships with content providers such as medical associations, academic medical centers, other CME providers to create bespoke CME content, medical education content for physicians, for pharmacists, for nurse practitioners, PAs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we've got about 15 exclusive partnerships right now. Because of my background in orthopedics, we've been most successful earliest in working with some of our orthopedic association partners. So the Orthopedic Trauma Association is one of our first partners, the American Orthopedic Foot and Ankle Society, some of the podiatry associations, and some others are our premium partners. And we've created CME content that you can only get on ConveyMed. Again, because we think, that this is how people want to consume content. Let's just make it easy for them to do it. So, a busy physician can search for a piece of content, purchase it on our app, listen to it at their convenience, take the quiz right there in the app, and they've earned out a quarter of their CME on their drive to the hospital. And so the content creator, because you can think about us as medical Spotify, if you will, the content creator gets a percentage of the revenue. So we're really kind of a digital marketplace. It's kind of how we set up the business model.
I love that. I was just going to ask, so are you 100% thinking of yourselves as the platform or marketplace? Or are there instances where you'll also create content, or you want to stay away from that side?
So we really want to be the distributor of content. We are not accredited And I don't think we want to become an accredited provider of content.
Okay.
We really want to be a partner with the experts who are already creating content. So a lot of our content we've repurposed, for example, webinars, converted those into podcasts, and then stream them on our platform. So there's a great opportunity if you're an association or if you're an academic medical center, you're running a conference or you've got all this virtual content that you've done over the last year or so that's still very relevant clinically, but you want to extend the reach of that audience. Let's talk about a way in which we can repurpose that content into podcasts, maybe put it into 15-minute chunks, into different learning modules, if you will, and make it available for purchase and for easy and accessible CME consumption. We don't want to get into it. We produce content in the same way that we're doing this right now. We'll record, we'll edit. We have a sound engineering team to do all the background work. For somebody who doesn't know how to get started with a podcast, we can do all that.
Okay.
But we don't want to get into actually creating the content because, we're not content experts. Let's rely on the experts to do that.
That's great. That makes sense. And you mentioned a few minutes ago the metrics. So one of the great things about podcasts is you can measure, you can see when people are consuming, how long. I mean, what do you see as the sweet spot in terms of A, the clinician type, B, the type of time of day of the week, and then you've kind of alluded to, but also sort of time frame. What's the bullseye?
I think the time of day, we don't know yet on the time of day. That's a good question. That would make an interesting sort of case study. And I'm going to take your advice and maybe we'll do that. There are some studies that show that the sweet spot for a podcast is 15 to 30 minutes max. Yeah. And you mentioned it earlier. I think it lines up with an adult learner's attention span. And as we age, our attention span shortens, unfortunately. And for the younger, audience who has a younger brain, they like to listen to content at 1.5 speed or even 2x speed. I don't know how they do it. I certainly can't do it, but the young mind can, and particularly the younger generation. My own children are this way. They can tune out other types of noise and really focus on things like that with other mediums going on. Whereas I used to, sit in a dark room, sit in a quiet room to study.
Right.
But I don't know the question on the timing, but I think the length is around 15 to 30 minutes. What we're finding though, which is interesting, because we offer the ability for users to view images while they're listening, right? Mm-hmm. Case presentations are suddenly possible as a podcast. And actually what we want to do with some of our content partners is to create a searchable library of case presentations. As a physician, that's how physicians learn, is through cases. Yep. And that doesn't really exist yet. So an audio library of cases. And so we think of it as a potential point of care reference, where if you're dealing with a difficult patient or a difficult case, you're not exactly sure what you want to do. I wonder if somebody's done a podcast on something very similar. I can listen to it on my drive home. I can look at some slides, get some references for some additional learning that might help me deal with a very specific patient. So it's something that we're very keen on doing. Because the way we built our platform, I think we can deliver that content in a way that is more impactful than just say, your standard audio podcast.
That's neat. Talk a little bit about the revenue model. So does a user pay a subscription, pay per episode, or are you making the fees through sponsors, or is there a number of different ways that you guys generate revenue?
Yeah, there are a number of different monetization options, and we're still pretty early stage. Where we've had the app in the App Store since last September, so we're still learning. But the way it's set up now is the app is free in the App Store. Okay. Our premium partners will place content available for a la carte purchase in the app. So the end users will have to make an in-app purchase of content. So that could be an individual episode, or we can organize those into bundles for CME content or premium content. Some of our partners with free content, we do have sponsorships or audio advertising opportunities for med tech or pharma companies to sort of engage in reaching an audience through podcasting, which is actually a very effective way in which to tell your story based on some of the consumer data on podcast advertising. So there's an opportunity there. And all of that, we share the revenues that we generate on a specific channel with the channel creator. Again, Medical Spotify. We are evolving to a subscription model for the platform itself. Okay. For us, at this stage of our development, we are aggressively and ambitiously, if you will, seeking exclusive content partners to get to a critical mass of content such that an annual subscription would be something of value to the end user. Then they can just get all you can eat CME and access to all that premium content to pay one price. That's some development work that we have to do on our platform. We expect to roll that out in the third quarter, going into the fourth quarter of this year.
Okay.
So we expect that to be a new monetization model for us.
That makes sense. And you mentioned orthopedics obviously was a natural place to start because of your background in that. As you expand outward, are you thinking about sort of vertical by vertical, if you will, or are you letting it grow organically? How do you think about that?
That's a great question. So we are thinking about it vertical by vertical. However, we are also trying to be opportunistic.
Sure.
So we have opportunities that are brewing in oncology and women's health and internal medicine. So we'll certainly put a lot of focus there. We have a really interesting opportunity for pharmacy. So we're in the process of working with the Pharmacy Podcast Network. Todd Urey, who sort of has a network of the top pharmacy podcasts aimed at pharmacists, are working together to work with his partners to create accredited content for pharmacists. I think that's a big opportunity for us and a great opportunity for pharmacists to earn, because just like physicians and nurse practitioners, they have continuing education requirements there. So we are looking at it vertical by vertical, but we're also trying to be somewhat, opportunistic.
That makes sense. And is it fair to say that all of the content is CME related or not necessarily?
Not necessarily. As I mentioned earlier, we serve as a podcast directory. So we pull in a lot of the podcasts that are already out on open platforms.
Okay.
So if you're already listening to a popular medical podcast on Apple, chances are we have it. We may not, but chances are we have it on our platform. That's typically non-CME free, and that will always be free. But alongside all the free content that's non-CME, we want to be able to serve up CME content. And part of once you sign up and become a user of ConveyMed, you sign up based on your specialty, but also you sign up based on your interests. And this is an important point. And that is, so if you sign up, if you're interested in oncology, women's health, et cetera, we will take all of the oncology and women's health podcasts that we have and serve those up into your feed.
Okay. That's slick.
And then any new content that in those interest areas that didn't exist when you signed up, we will auto subscribe you to that content. So if you want to unsubscribe, if there are podcasts you don't want to see, you can always unsubscribe and you won't see them anymore. If you want to search for podcasts that are on our platform that maybe don't line up with that interest, but you're just interested in it, you can go into the search bar, type in a search term and find different podcasts on things that may not have aligned up with your original interests. But we think the search function is very helpful. We help our creators find their audience based on how the audience has opted in to our platform.
Available both iOS and Android?
It's available on iOS and Android, yeah.
Okay.
But it's only mobile, so you can't consume our content on a website. So you can either use it on your mobile phone or on your tablet.
Okay. Which do you see more popularity on one versus the other, iOS or Android side? Yeah,
that's a good question. I think today our focus is in North America, and most clinicians, most healthcare professionals are iOS. My understanding is we've looked and we've done some market research, is you go outside the United States into Europe, Asia, Latin America, there's a bigger percentage of Android users. So we're looking to go global also in the third to fourth quarter. For example, Europe has some privacy restrictions that we've got to comply with. And so there's just a little bit of, we're a startup, we're scarce resources, and we have to allocate our resources where we can, make the biggest bang for our buck. But we do want to go to a global audience. My experience with Smith & Nephew, with a platform that we had where we hosted a lot of our webinar content, there's actually a larger majority of the users of that platform were from Europe, from India, from Asia than from the United States. So although our initial focus is the United States, because again, we're just getting going, we think there's a huge opportunity globally.
I agree. I think that makes sense. Have you guys explored, or do you build affiliate partnerships? And what I mean by that, and I bring this up just because it's something we're currently working on. So we have found over time, and I'll use basic example, we have an investment bank that we have a partnership with.
Hmm.
They're looking for clients to do sell side M&A work for, so companies that are getting ready to sell.
Mhm.
And so we're a natural feeder for that. With 2,200 startups in the network, they have tons of potential clients here. So we've set up an affiliate relationship whereby they pay us essentially commission, and that's more of a high level service business. We have others that we're setting up that are more automated, but what we've learned over time is by setting up affiliates and essentially renting their networks, it expands our audience of folks that are engaging. And it seems like that makes a lot of sense for a network like yours that are building out. Have you done any of that yet?
Not yet. Actually, it's interesting that you mentioned that. We were talking about that literally just today with some potential partners who could bring very large audiences, to our platform along with their content. And so setting up some sort of affiliate, if that's what you mean, is an idea certainly worth exploring. And we would certainly be open to that if any of your listeners have interest in that. So
yeah, I'll follow up with that. There's a tool, if you want to take a look at it, called Tapfiliate. That we did an evaluation. You need a way to track all of this. And so we've looked at a lot of different, and there's different terms. Some call it influencer, some call it ambassadors, some call it affiliates. We've looked at the different platforms that do these to see how do you do this at scale and keep some sense of organization around it. And Tapfiliate's a pretty popular one. Anything, Mike, you want to share that maybe we haven't covered that would be helpful for listeners to learn about ConveyMed? Obviously, they can go to Android or Apple Store and download the app. What else should they know about you guys? And maybe as a part of that, are you raising capital? What's on the docket for you through the balance of the year? What are your key initiatives?
Yeah, that's a great segue, because yes, we are about to kick off our seed round. And so yes, we'd be very interested in speaking with potential investors, looking for a potential lead investor to lead our next round, so that we can really scale commercially. We've had a lot of traction with some very name brand academic medical centers and associations. We haven't signed them yet, so I'm a little reticent to disclose who they are yet.
Sure.
But we're to a point, we're a pretty small company. We're going to have so much content from our exclusive partners, we're not going to be able to handle it all, which is a good problem to have, right?
Yeah.
So we are in the process of, identifying who's, a good investor, somebody who's a partner who can help us scale on the dev side, but also on the commercial side, can bring relationships and help us on the UI UX side and improve our user experience. I mean, we see the success, for example, of something like Wordle. We probably all do Wordle, something so very simple. Right. They've gamified something very similar. I think there's some opportunity for us to gamify in a very simple way a learning experience, and to create competition and be able to share it on your social platform. And so those are some things we want to do. We've got all kinds of development ideas to create, deeper engagement with our listeners and users, and all those things require capital. So yes, we are in the process of raising capital right now. So we would love for if any of your listeners are investors, we would love to have a conversation about that. Okay,
good. We'll follow up more with that. I think there's definitely some things we can do maybe to help in that regard. And if there's anything else that you're thinking of as you move along, don't hesitate. I mean, I love the business. It's something that we believe in, and would love to support and see volume both on the listener side as well as on the content creator side. There's a lot of interesting content creators out there. And as it's getting easier and easier to create content, that opens up the door to people that weren't traditionally in that business, or at least didn't think that they were. So.
Well, that's a great point. I mean, and creating podcast content, if you've never done it before, seems sort of intimidating, but it's actually it's not hard at all. Right. And we have a Convey Studio, which is a resource that we provide to our content partners if they need help with recording, just like we are, with sound editing, engineering, professional voiceover talent, podcast release. We can provide, we can provide some advice and consulting around what types of content should a given partner consider based on our relationships with other content partners. That information is not necessarily proprietary. As I said, we're looking to do case presentations for mini courses for podcasts, or clinical guideline reviews in podcast format. These are all things that really haven't been done yet, that we have our platform is set up to do. We just need the content partners to to engage with our vision. And actually our content partners, once they see it, they're like, hey, can we do this? And we're like, well, no, but hey, let's change that. We can change our platform. You might know the CEO at Apple or Spotify, and they may or may not take your phone call, but I will. If you have a piece of content or a way in which you want to deliver content that we can't do, let's talk about that. Because again, this is a platform that's evolving, and we'd like to continue to develop it and to refine it. We can only do that with great partnerships.
Well, in many ways, you guys are sort of the mecca of the recording world. I mean, you've got Graceland there, and you've got, sort of a whole history.
Sun Studio, yeah,
what better
absolutely.
place to have
Stacks. Yeah, we've got a great Beale Street, you name it, man.
Yeah,
there's a lot of musical talent coming out of Memphis, home of the blues.
That's right. Well, Mike, thanks for spending time today on the show. Great to meet you and learn a little bit about the company. We'd love to help you guys accelerate and see you succeed. So let's definitely stay in touch and we'll keep talking.
Yeah, Tobin, thanks so much for having us. Enjoyed it.
My pleasure.
See you again soon for the next episode of Innovation for Alpha. Make sure to go to Innovation for Alpha for access to prior episode links, show notes, and other valuable resources. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Before making any investment decisions, please consult with a professional. This show is copyrighted by Angel Indie Media, and written permission must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting.